All right, folks, welcome back. Let's catch ourselves up a little bit. We started out with the intuition that killing someone is usually worse than letting someone die, or is almost always worse than letting someone die. It is wrong to murder, but it is not wrong to allow someone to die from natural causes or from a cause that you may have been able to prevent, but would have been costly to you to prevent their death. So that's where we began. And Thompson says, well, hold on, not so fast. There are cases of killing and letting die that are otherwise symmetrical or identical, where they are equally bad. So we looked at Alfred and Bert, where Alfred and Bert both wanted their wives dead. Alfred poisoned his wife, Bert. His wife accidentally poisoned herself, and he could have saved her, but he didn't. And in both cases, we thought they were pretty nasty guys and shouldn't have done what they did. So killing and letting die seem equally bad. But there are cases where it's clear that killing is worse than letting die, like the surgeon case, right? Our surgeon, David, has a patient, or has 5 patients who each need a different organ transplanted. And a healthy person who just happens to be a match for all 5 walks in the door. And David could kill the one person to save his 5 patients, or he could let the one person live, in which case he lets his 5 patients die. In that case, we thought, oh, clearly David shouldn't kill a patient to save his 5, or kill another person to save his 5 patients. He should let his 5 patients die, because killing is worse than letting die, it seems. But then we saw the trolley problem, and this is where we left off, with the second version of the trolley problem, where Frank, our passenger, is rolling along on the trolley. The brakes go out, the driver drops dead, and Frank has to decide whether to allow the trolley to continue rolling on down the track and kill 5 people. He won't be responsible for their deaths. They're going to die either way. It's not his, he's not in any way responsible for them. He'd just be letting them die. Or he can switch the trolley onto a side track and kill one person, and he is responsible for that death. He killed that one person. He directed the trolley at them. But we think he probably should, or at least it's permissible for him to do so, because he saved 5 people. It sucks that he kills one in the process. But if he saves 5 people, that's great. So maybe killing isn't always worse than letting die. And the real tension here is that David can't kill one to save his 5, but Frank can kill one, maybe even should kill one to save his 5. Well, how are we going to resolve this? How are we going to resolve this tension? Well, before we can resolve it, we've got to make it even more complicated. There are more cases to consider. So let's turn next to the third trolley problem, the third version of the trolley problem that Thompson gives us, the fat man variation. I'm sorry about the language here. I'm sorry about any fat shaming that's going on here. It's not language that I would have chosen, but it's the way that Thompson presents this, and so I'm going to go with it. George is on a footbridge over the trolley tracks. He knows trolleys and can see that the one approaching the bridge is out of control. On the track back of the bridge, there are 5 people. The banks are so steep, they will not be able to get off the track in time. George knows that the only way to stop an out-of-control trolley is to drop a very heavy weight into its path, but the only available sufficiently heavy weight is a fat man also watching the trolley from the footbridge. George can shove the fat man onto the track in the path of the trolley, killing the fat man, or he can refrain from doing this, letting the 5 die. Most people wouldn't themselves push the fat man off the bridge. And we think that George probably shouldn't, right? That it's impermissible for him to shove this person off of the bridge in order to stop the trolley. Now, set aside your worries about whether a fat man would really be heavy enough to stop the trolley. It's a thought experiment, right? We need to take out some of the complications here. And just consider it as it is described. Suppose that the fat man would in fact stop the trolley, and George has pretty good reason to believe this. we still think that he shouldn't do it. It would be wrong to shove that man off the bridge to his death in order to save those 5 other people. He should let those 5 people die. So, killing is once again worse than letting die. Killing the one person by switching the trolley onto the other track, that's permissible in order to save the 5. Killing the one person by shoving them off the bridge, that's impermissible in order to save the 5. Why? Well, there are some psychological explanations that have been offered here. That we have an aversion to physically harming another human being by physically using our body to inflict that harm on them, and that we perceive as more wrong than simply flipping a switch that would lead to the death of a person. There's a possibility there that sort of aversion has something to do with a kind of deontological ethical framework that we might implicitly adopt in that sort of setting that overrides a utilitarian ethical framework that we adopt in the switch flipping setting. Perhaps. But we're not interested in that psychological explanation. We're interested in making our moral principles fit with one another. So the principle that killing is worse than letting die is just shot through with holes at this point. What principle explains why it's permissible, maybe even obligatory, to switch the tracks and kill the one person to save the 5 for Frank, but it is impermissible for George to push the man off the bridge and stop the trolley to save the 5. What principle could explain this? How do we make sense of this? And Thompson points out that this is not a singular case, that we can come up with many examples that have this same structure. So she gives us just one. Harry Irving and the Russian bomb, right? Harry's president and has just been told that the Russians have launched an atom bomb toward New York. The only way in which the bomb can be prevented from reaching New York is by deflecting it, but the only deflection path available will take the bomb onto Worcester. Harry can do nothing, letting all of New York die, or he can press the button deflecting the bomb and killing all of Worcester. Well, it seems like New York, population, multiple millions, Worcester, a lot smaller city. It seems like whether he likes New Yorkers or New Englanders better, he doesn't, it doesn't really matter. He ought to deflect the bomb onto Worcester. Harry probably should. It saves people. Consider Irving then. He's president, and same story, except this time he can't deflect the bomb. The only way that the bomb can be prevented from reaching New York is by dropping one of his own bombs on Worcester. The blast of the American bomb will pulverize the Russian bomb. Irving can do nothing, letting all of New York die, or he can press the button which launches an American bomb onto Worcester, killing all of Worcester. And I think most of us share the intuition that it would be wrong for the President of the United States to drop a bomb, an atomic bomb, on an American city, even if it were going to save another American city. That would be wrong. He has an obligation to those citizens, right? He has a responsibility to care for their well-being as well, and he shouldn't bomb them. But if that's the only place he can deflect the bomb to, well, that might be permissible. Why? Why is it okay to kill some to save more in one case, but not in the other? Well, Thompson finally gives us a first gloss at a distinction here. Maybe this is what's going on. Perhaps what distinguishes the cases in which the agent may act from those in which they may not, that is, the Frank cases from the George cases, is that in the permissible cases, like flipping the track or dropping or deflecting the bomb, they deflect a threat onto a larger group, or from a larger group onto a smaller group. So the trolley's going to hit somebody, and they deflect it off of the larger group of people onto the smaller group of people. Or the bomb is going to hit somebody, they deflect it off the larger group of people onto the smaller group of people. Right? So the intervention simply changes the course of the threat. It doesn't introduce a new threat. In the impermissible cases, they bring a different threat to bear on the smaller group. They bring a new threat to bear by the fat man on the bridge would not have been in harm's way had George not pushed him. So that's a new threat that's been introduced. George is pushing. Similarly, the people of Worcester would not have been under threat had the president not launched the bomb at Worcester. So maybe it's that, right? It's bringing a different threat to bear versus deflecting a threat. But why should that matter? If we're good utilitarians, if we think all that matters is the balance of pleasure and pain in the world, both cases bring about the same results, right? In the Trolley case, 1 dead for 5 alive. In the bomb case, all of New York alive for Worcester dead. And it's the same outcome. It just brings it about in slightly different ways. Why should it matter how that outcome is brought about? Well, that's what we've got to try to make sense of. That's what we've got to try to explain. And in the next video, I'll pick up and try to do that.